Empower Youth Week Masterclass. Be inspired, be connected, be transformed.
My name is Advocate Jazz Vilakazi. I am an advocate of the High Court. I specialize in labor, corporate law, commercial law, as well as general litigation. I also have a strong background in sales and marketing and have got 15 years of experience in corporate life. I consult for various companies, and I'm also a motivational and public speaker and an occasional radio guest where I host topics on legal issues. I also host workshops with the aim of improving companies' bottom line and outlook. But most importantly, I'm passionate about giving back. Today, my talk will be on human rights and the youth in South Africa. So, our country has got a checkered history. In 1976, as some of you will remember from the history books, students came out and protested against the apartheid government. And that apartheid government went and created 4 classes of citizens, as it were. The state spending as well was quite proportional to those citizenry. In respect of education, for example, for every 4 rand that was spent on a white child, 1 rand was spent on an African child. And effectively what that system wanted to create was fodder for mining and labor. So black people could only be security guards, domestic workers, teachers, police, ultimately low-level work. But with 1994, we've then gotten a young democracy and a young constitution that has come in. And I call this constitution young because if you compare it to the American Constitution, that is over 240 years old, whilst ours is only 27 years old. So what does this constitution of ours now give us? Well, it guarantees to us a few certain rights. For example, the right to equality, which is covered in Section 9, the right to life and dignity, which is covered in Section 10 and 11, the right to basic education, and the right to further education, where the government is enjoined to take strides in order to ensure that that realization comes about. There's also a right to free speech, as well as the rights to bodily and psychological integrity covered by Section 12. And then also there's the right to freedom of trade and profession that is covered by Section 22. Well, since 1994, the reality of our young democracy is that we've seen more participation in the working world by the youth. We've also seen more entries into universities in respect of BA passes from matric. We've also seen a growth in tenders and entrepreneurship. And an example of that is Umsobomvu and the National Youth Development Agency that assists the youth in taking a part in this economy. But the other reality is that there is great unemployment amongst the youth. In fact, the numbers are pretty high there. And there's also despondency. But even for that, I say, the best opportunity lies where you live. You, as the future of this country, need to realize that you pass opportunity every day. Open your eyes and ears and ask the right questions, and you'll be able to find a great opportunity for yourself. So today, in talking about human rights and the youth in South Africa, I wanted to specifically touch on COVID-19 and the human rights of the youth in our country. Now, we all know that COVID-19 is a worldwide pandemic. No country or economy or type of person is not touched by it. And we know that in our country, in 2020, March 27, the president announced a lockdown, and that was the start of it. So the lockdown was actually preventative in nature because we don't have enough beds or hospitals in order to be accommodating of the crowd that will come in due to COVID. And also at that time, when he closed the country, there was not enough information that was prevalent in how to fight the disease. So that was the right thing to do. To put it in perspective, when the president closed down South Africa on the 27th of March 2020, the United States of America had nearly 86,000 cases of COVID-19 and 1,300 deaths. Today, as we stand, South Africa has recorded 81,500 deaths with 2.7 million cases of COVID. Compared to America, they've recorded over 637,000 deaths and 38.8 million cases. So we can see that the idea was correct by government. What then did COVID do? Well, what COVID really did is that it curtailed your rights. And the rights that were curtailed, for example, your right to movement. And we all know that now you can't go out at night, or your right to religion. Churches were closed, and then churches came in limited numbers. Your freedom to choice was also curtailed. For example, the use of alcohol. Right now, we have a situation where the country is closed, sorry, not the country, but the alcohol is closed between Friday and Sunday, and is only open Monday to Thursday. It also curtailed, for example, your freedom of expression, as well as property, and right to information as well. So then, was it reasonable, or is it reasonable for your rights to be curtailed? Well, in South Africa, the only human rights that are unlimited is the right to life and the right to dignity. And then in respect of all the other rights, your right to movement, your right to bodily integrity, your right to freedom of speech, we have Section 36 of the Constitution, which is called the Limitation Clause. And the Limitation Clause says, your rights can be limited provided there is a law of general application and that the limitation is reasonable and justifiable in an open and democratic society that we live in. So if we take it back to what COVID has done, we know that alcohol, we know that churches, we know that cigarettes were banned. Well, the reason why those things were banned specifically in that manner was because our hospitals don't have enough capacity. We know that December 2020, again, the government banned any gatherings, and that's still tied to capacity of the country. So where then did they get the right? Well, the Disaster Management Act 57 of 2002 is the law of general application that the Constitution speaks about. And that is where the government has gotten the right to curtail and curb some of these freedoms, because they are looking at the future and saying, will we be able to handle the large numbers that can come because of COVID? So there's been a lot of talk then in the country about people being vaccinated and people in the workplace not wanting to be vaccinated. And I just wanted to give clarity on that. Well, the issue here is that it's about balancing the rights of the employee as an individual versus the rights of an employer and the number of people he has there. I know that there's been an issue with the safety of the vaccine as well. But however, in this case, that issue does not necessarily come into the fray, as it were. So we know that, as I've explained, people have rights. For example, you have the right to freedom and security. You have the right to bodily integrity. But that right is actually limited by Section 36. And Section 36 goes on to speak about the 4 areas, the type of right it is, for example, the effect of that right on the people, and the reason why this right is being limited by government. Now, as we stand in South Africa, no decision by the courts has been taken yet, but there are actually 2 cases that show that your employer may be able to force you, and that government may actually be able to enforce mandatory vaccinations in the workplace. One of the first cases I want to quickly talk about is the Minister of Health of the province of the Western Cape versus Goliath and others. Now, at issue in this case, which is a 2009 case, was that Goliath actually had TB, and that TB was resistant to drugs. So the strain that he had was resistant to drugs. And Goliath and a few other respondents were actually infectious. The question before the court was whether their compulsory admission to and the continued isolation in hospital was legally justifiable. This is what the court held. Prevention and deterrence, rather than treatment after the fact, is therefore of a prime importance. So it is better to save lives before things get out of hand, is effectively what the court was saying. And with that, the court actually forced Goliath and the others to get treatment for TB against their will. The other case that I want to speak about is a rather interesting case, and it comes from the Western Cape. It's the Minister of Safety and Security and another versus Gaqra. It's a 2002 case. In this case, the facts are as follows. The issue here was about a bullet that was lodged in Gaqra's leg. And the belief was that Gaqra was part of a botched robbery where he had gotten shot and a few other people had died. Now, Gaqra himself opposed having the bullet removed. And once he was apprehended after the robbery by the police, he gave the police a story. He had been injured with a screwdriver and that his girlfriend could come and testify on his behalf. Well, the police managed to track down the girlfriend, and the girlfriend said, well, no, I'm not his girlfriend. And I wasn't part of any sort of fight that he was involved in. Then the police took Gaqra to the Surgeon General, or the district surgeon, who is a state-appointed doctor. And the doctor took an X-ray and found that in Gaqra's leg was a clear bullet. Well, the matter went to court. And Gaqra said to the court, well, the surgery could kill me, and this is why I don't want it. The district surgeon got up and said, actually, this is actually a very uncomplicated surgery, and we'll take it out without necessarily affording him any injury. Well, at issue here was whether the state is allowed to effectively assault you legally. The court held that the respondents or Gaqra's interests in all the circumstances are of a lesser significance. Though the intrusion into his body is substantial, the community interest must prevail in this instance. And what were the community interests? To ensure that crime was under control and to ensure that perpetrators were brought to book. The court ordered the removal of the bullet within 24 hours after that case was concluded. So I hope that you see that, in fact, you saying no to the vaccine in the work environment, you may actually be causing more harm to the employer's interest. If one considers that the law also says that an employer has a duty to ensure that the environment that everybody works in is safe, the employer then has a duty to take all reasonable steps in order to ensure that that environment is safe. Then the last one that I want to speak about has not been decided in this country, but it is a United States case. The case of Claassen and others versus the trustees of Indiana University. In fact, this case was concluded in the last 2 months or 3 months. So even in the university space, the University of Indiana decided that all faculty members, all students and staff were to be vaccinated unless they qualified for a medical or a religious exemption. And in that, 8 students then came out and say, no, we will not be vaccinated. They saw wearing of masks as an intrusion. And 6 of them took religious exception to the vaccine. Well, the students took the matter to court. And the question before the court was whether the university acted constitutionally in mandating students to vaccinate. Well, in that judgment, the court went and looked at the number of people that had been tested because the students were claiming that the vaccine wasn't safe. And the court found that more than 300,000 people had been tested for the vaccine. They looked at the approved usage by the Food and Drug Administration Agency, and they also looked at the dangers of COVID-19 on the community. This then is what the court held, that vaccines and other public health requirements are common because most of us actually have been already vaccinated for things like polio. So the court looked into that and said, these things are common. It's not the first time that there is a vaccine. Secondly, the court held that the university had allowed for exemptions in this case on medical grounds and religious grounds. But most importantly, the court held that the students could choose to attend a school that has no vaccination requirements if they were against being vaccinated by the University of Indiana. The court threw out the challenge. And in the last week or so, the matter then has gone to the Supreme Court in America. And the Supreme Court has actually thrown out the matter again without even hearing it. So I want to then bring it back. You do have rights as a citizen of the country. That is undeniable. But in times of crises, such as war, such as outbreaks, such as illnesses, those rights can be curbed. The government has gone out of its way in order to accommodate the rights of the people. For example, giving you limited movement. For example, giving you limited operation times in terms of retail. But the government has got a law that gives them that right. And in terms of the workspace, as I said, your rights as one person do not supersede the rights of the entire majority. And most importantly, your employer has that duty to ensure that the environment is safe. You will have seen from the two cases that I mentioned in South Africa that in fact in a working environment, mandatory vaccination can be enforced. And more than that, in the schooling environment, that also it will appear that vaccination can be enforced. So I leave you with those words in respect of the talk on human rights today. In closing, I just want to say, South Africa is the most exciting country in the world. This is the best time to be alive. And thanks to COVID-19 and technology, we are able to make a difference. Opportunities everywhere around you. The question to ask is, what can I do to make things better? If you find that answer, you'll find your wealth. Thanks for your time.
For more informative videos, visit www.empowaYouth.co.za.